So these are all going to be 2-minute questions. There'll be a 2-minute opening question, or I should say 2-minute opening period, a 2-minute closing period. Each of our 3 questions will also be 2 minutes each. So I hope that all, we after a long day, we need to do something simple. So two and two made sense to us. And so with that said, that'll be our format. And Ron, where's Ron Berger? Right here.
30 seconds left.
And that means the cows are coming home in here, Bill, okay?
Time to get to work.
All right, so here's how the format ended up like it did. So what we said as a grassroots network is that we wanted to give all candidates a chance to be here today. So Ron, bless his heart, sent out lots of notices to the different campaigns. Not all of them responded, as you can tell, but that turned out we got a smaller number than we could have, because you all know we have like 15 or 16 potential candidates, and there's just no way we could have held a forum late in the day for that number. So it turned out we ended up with 5 candidates and or their surrogates to be with us. So we thought, well, let's do something extra. Let's give you a chance to hear their own campaigns in their own words. So that's how this came about today. And that's why these 5 folks are here. They all rented a table, which was our requirement. And so that's how this came about. We had to do this fairly, and we thought that best fit that standard of fairness for everybody. So with that said, I think we're ready to begin. And what we'll do, we have an opening and closing. Each one is 2 minutes. So we'll start here, then I'll rotate. Each time we do another question, we'll just keep rotating, so no person is starting in the same spot over and over again. So Mike, we'll start with you. Introduce yourself and get 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
All right, thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Mike McCabe. I am one of the 10,000 or so people running for governor. I was born and raised on a farm here in Wisconsin in Clark County. I spent most of my life, though, my adult life, working to expose and break the grip of big money influence in politics. And both of those things are big motivations for bringing me to this race. I look at what Wisconsin is becoming, and I just see us becoming a shadow of our former selves. I want to do something about that. I want Wisconsin to be a place where we aim as a state to erase the words working poor from our vocabulary. I want this place to be a state with a living wage for every worker, health care for all, debt-free education for everyone, high-speed internet everywhere. I want Wisconsin to be a place that aims to be the first state in the nation fully powered by renewable energy. But I'll tell you, if we're gonna get to that state, we have to deal with something else, and that's the cancer growing in the body of democracy. Because I will tell you this, we will not ever get clean air and clean water from dirty politics. We will not get good health care from a sick political system. We won't get all of the things we want. We'll never get anything but thoughts and prayers from elected officials after every mass shooting. As long as we have elected officials paid to offer nothing but thoughts and prayers and take no other action, we will not get living wages from a dying democracy. We have got to deal with that cancer growing in the body of democracy. And that means that as Democrats, we cannot continue to play along with a system of legal bribery. We've got to practice what we preach. We've got to lead by example. We do that, and we can take back this state, and we can make this state, make the state of Wisconsin the state that it has the potential to become. Thanks so much for being here, everybody.
All right, everybody, I'm not Andy Gronick, obviously. I'm Brandon Weathersby, I'm the Communications Director. Andy's very sorry that he couldn't be here today. He spent the morning marching with students in Milwaukee for the March for Our Lives, and today, right now, he should just have wrapped up with the 4th CD at their convention. But I'll tell you a little bit about Andy in case folks in here don't know him. He's a Milwaukee area businessman. He spent 35 years in the private sector doing a really tough job, which is dropping down into crisis situations, dealing with struggling companies, and making sure that they were connected with the resources they needed to turn around and create good paying jobs in their area and in their communities. He built that business, which is called AccuVal. He built that business into international prominence. It's a very, very impressive feat. And so this was someone who, even though he was having a lot of success in the private sector, continued to feel like they could do more. They knew their set of skills, they knew what they had to contribute to their state, and just knew that if they had the chance to do it one day, that they'd do a little bit more for the city of Milwaukee, or he'd do a little bit more for the state of Wisconsin. And so now here we are, decades later, and he has that opportunity. He looks at the state of Wisconsin and sees the separation here, sees how divided the state is, sees how Scott Walker's divide and conquer strategy has worked to perfection for everyone except the people of the state of Wisconsin. You got Scott Walker and his friends who are reaping all the benefits, but not people here in this state. So so what Andy would like to do is Andy wants to do exactly what he did for 35 years in business. Bring people together, have real conversations about the real problems facing each and every one of you in this room and across the state, and come together with innovative solutions that can get the job done, that can make sure that he can deliver when he's in the governor's chair. That's something that we need in this state right now. And I'll tell you this, is that one thing that I know about Andy personally, and the reason I love to work for him and fight for him each and every day, is that he is a fighter. And he's someone who is very, very passionate about getting things done when he is the executive of the state. And he'll do that as your next governor. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Flynn. I'm a candidate for governor, and I wanted to come over and introduce myself and tell you why I'm running. First of all, I'd like to introduce my wife, Mary, who's with me. Mary and I have been married 41 years. She's originally from Monroe, Wisconsin, and it's good to be back over here. Very briefly, my background, I'm a Navy veteran. I was the chair of this party, the whole state party, for 2 terms, and we elected Tony Earl, we elected Senator Bill Proxmire, retired our debt, unified our party, and I was the co-chair of John Kerry's primary campaign back in 2004. This state, our state, used to be known for honest government, clean water, and high wages. Today, it's known nationally for corrupt government, dirty water, and low wages. And I'm going to turn that around. Now, 2 minutes isn't a lot of time to talk about a lot of issues, but I will say this. I was very moved just before this forum in sitting in on part of the criminal justice workshop. And I want to tell you that one of the key issues in my campaign that I announced several months ago is the full legalization of marijuana. Full legalization for medicinal, recreational purposes, taxed, regulated for people over 21. And I will pardon anybody in this prison or jail system as the governor of this state who's in there for possession offenses. If there's no violence or gang activity, they get pardoned. I'm going to empty the jails and prisons of this state of a lot of low-level possession offenders. Mary and I live in Milwaukee, and there is a disparity, a racial disparity, but there's a rural-urban disparity. You go north of Highway 29, there's a lot of people who are in there too. And it's just dead wrong, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to be a very forceful governor, and I'm looking forward to the questions. I'd like to earn your support on August 14th. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, many of you know my wife, Kelda Royce, because she represented Mazomanie, Black Earth, Barry, Cross Plains, and Madison in the Assembly for 4 years. I am not Kelda Royce. And I was gonna use the campaign's talking points to introduce what she's running for here, but actually the last song by the Grannies inspired me to tell a little story about Kelda and how she made the decision to run for governor. We were, it was a few months ago, we were having dinner with friends of ours, and they were talking about, as we always do, we were talking about politics, and these friends looked at me and they said, Dan, why don't you run for governor? I said, you look like a governor. You rock a blazer, like you just look like a guy who could run for governor. And I could just feel Kelda tense up. I could like the veins on her head start to come out, right? So we're driving home, and she's like, Dan, you're not qualified to be the governor. You didn't serve in the assembly. You're not a lawyer. You didn't pass me. You don't even know how state government works. And I was like, Kelda, I didn't say I was running for governor. So I think that might have pushed her over the edge. And so here we are. I'm going to do my best to talk about some of the policy issues and some of the answer the questions that come up here in the discussion. But just imagine someone smarter than me, someone nicer than me, and someone much more qualified than me answering these questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kathleen Beinhout. I I was in the Capitol yesterday working on a lot of work that happened because of a very crazy week in the Capitol. And I took a phone call from a man from Kenosha who said, I just read your column and I realized that I have a van that is worth more than $10,000. And with the new special session bills that I call kick people when they're down, I'm gonna lose my health care. His name is Raymond, he's in a wheelchair. He said it was impossible to get a van that was wheelchair accessible, that was worth less than $10,000, and that's one of the bills that was passed in the special session we had in the legislature a couple weeks ago. He said, why did I hear about this? I didn't hear anything about this. How come we're not fighting to stop this? And I said, well, Raymond, I've been fighting to stop it and writing about it about every other week so that people know about it. But right now, we don't have the votes to stop it. We have to change who's in the Capitol. Yeah. And for me, yesterday afternoon, and it was about 5 o'clock, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I want to be able to veto these horrible bills, but better yet, be signing a whole bunch of really good legislation. Why I am running for governor is to put people first, people at the center of state policy, people as the top priority, people just like Raymond. Far too long, the state has spent way too much money on helping a few very well-connected companies. And we have the money, ladies and gentlemen, to put people first, to give free tuition for tech colleges and two-year campuses. And go to my website, Kathleen Biden. All about it.
We're ready to warm up. Here's our first question. This will go to Brandon. We'll just be rotating down the line here. What special assets, skills, and experiences would you bring to the governor's office? How will these attributes affect the laws, policies, and actions you may take?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, that's all.
That's easy, because I'm not running for governor. No, I think the answer to this is pretty simple, and it goes to why I'm here and why I'm working for Andy. I spoke to Andy last summer about potentially coming on his campaign. Didn't have to. I was working at the Democratic Party at that time, decent job, a job that continues to be a job throughout an election cycle. Unlike a lot of what we're doing right now, you lose, you go home. And one of the things that made me want to work for Andy was his insistence on having conversations again in this state, his insistence on bringing people together in this state, and knowing that just because a problem is tough and just because there is a lot of opposition on the other side doesn't mean that there's no common ground to be had there. So I think I can speak for Andy that that's the kind of approach that he'll bring from the executive's office, that he's someone who can work with the other side of the aisle to figure out, these are things that the people of Wisconsin want us to get done. Let's get it done. Let's work together to find that common ground and make it happen, whether it be on jobs, schools, roads, healthcare. Let's make that happen. And so I think that's one thing that was very refreshing about Andy and refreshing about his leadership style, and could be refreshing for the politics and the culture of our state, is to have someone who's willing to stand in the middle and say, anyone wants to be a part of the conversation, anyone wants to be a part of the solution, let's come here and let's figure it out. I'm not going to sacrifice my values, not whatsoever. I'm a Democrat and I'm a progressive, but let's come to the center of the table here and let's figure some stuff out. And I think that that's what the difference between Andy and any of the other candidates that I've been able to see or work with, and I think that would be the difference between Andy and obviously our governor, who governs from one side of the aisle. Thank you.
I'm reminded of an anecdote involving Adlai Stevenson when he ran against Eisenhower. And he gave a terrific speech, and somebody from the crowd shouted out, "You will get the vote of every thinking person." And he shouted back, "Yes, but I need a majority." As Mario Cuomo said, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. The question is, there's going to be one Democrat on that stage against Walker in October. It'll be great to harness all the abilities of all these people, but there won't be. There'll be one. You're the employers, and we're auditioning for a job. You've got to decide. You're not going to get perfection. You've got to decide who is best able to prosecute the case against Scott Walker, to take him apart on that stage. I'm a former Navy officer. I've been on the bridge of a ship in the North Atlantic in a gale at night with sailors under me. I can handle myself. I've also been a trial lawyer, and I've appeared before the Supreme Court many times, Courts of Appeals. I know how to argue. He's an untruthful individual. In fact, I know Scott Walker. I've been on panels with him. I've never seen him express a human emotion. In other words, happiness, joy, sorrow, fear, nothing. It's totally robotic. And how to dismantle somebody like that is an art, it really is. And I'm looking forward to it. I really am. And the truth is, there are very, very good people here. So you've got to decide. You've got to look everybody in the eye and say, who do we think can really do the job? I've had a great deal of experience. I was the chair of the party. And if you know, being the chair of a party, you think there are divisions now and all this, you know, Bernie Hillary, resistance establishment. There are always divisions in the party. I've unified the party once. I've led the party once. I would like to lead it again. I would like to lead the state as the governor. Thank you very much.
Two attributes come to mind with Kelda that I think really stand out for me. The first takes me back to her first race for Assembly. It was 10 years ago now. She knocked on over 20,000 doors. Maybe you knocked on some of your doors as well. And the way she did it, I found remarkable. We had just met. We were still dating at the time, actually, but I was driving her to a lot of these different doors. And for those of you who've done doors, you knock on the door and you have a message and you want to get the message out to the person. She took the opposite approach. She knocked on the door, people would come to the door, and she just asked them, what is it that's on your mind when it comes to state government? What can we do better? And she would wait. And there would be these ridiculously awkward pauses because she would just wait for, and then give it 30 seconds, give it however long it took. People would just gush out with the thoughts that were in their head. So I think that's the first thing for me, is she's a great listener, just fantastic. The second is that we have a constant reminder of the priorities of the next generation in our house. We're raising 4 girls, and the example that comes to mind is after the Parkland shooting recently, my daughter Erin, who's 17 years old and is a senior at West High School, she came home and she said, Kelda, for the first time, I mean, there's been school shootings after school shootings, but for the first time, I'm actually fearful when I go to school, and I don't know what to do about it, and can you help me think this through? The next week, we found out that our 4-year-old daughter, who's in preschool, has been doing active shooter drills in the preschool. So this is something where, you know, when we wake up in the morning, we are thinking about what do we do to make this a better world for the next generation.
I think that running for governor is a job interview, and we need to talk about who has the skills, who has the background, who has the temperament, who has the ability to be able to figure out what has to be done. The governor writes one bill, it's called the budget, and it's a big bill, and it governs a whole lot of state government. My background, I started out working at 14. I was a nurse's aide for 5 years. I put myself through school. My first job was as a teacher. My bachelor's degree is in education. I taught 5 classes of health to 15-year-olds and decided to go to graduate school. I focused on health. I'd worked in healthcare. I went back to working in healthcare. Eventually, I got my doctorate and went in to be a professor. I spent 10 years as a university professor. I know healthcare, the health policy, the details. Healthcare is the largest single part of the state budget. It's growing faster than any other part of the state budget. Then I followed my childhood dream to become a full-time dairy farmer. I got up at 4 a.m. and sometimes those cows' tails were a little dirty and they hit me across the face, and Republican attack ads don't bother me. I had was in the difficult position of having a son when we had to drop our health insurance because it cost too much money and the price of milk was really low. We didn't have health insurance, and my son was very ill and ended up having to have emergency surgery and $15,000, and 3 scars later, we ended up taking out a second mortgage. And the story that I tell is told by farmers and city people all across the state, and it is the reason why we need health care for all. Yeah. We can solve this problem, but we need somebody who does the homework, who knows the details, who knows where the bones are buried.
time around the state capitol dates back to the early 1980s, so it's been over 30 years. I have been around that place long enough to actually have witnessed the people's business being done in a way that earned Wisconsin a reputation from coast to coast as a beacon of clean and open and honest government. And I've watched our state's political culture poisoned. Now, my life's work has primarily been as an independent watchdog. That work put me in a position of calling out Democrats and Republicans when I saw wrongdoing or unethical conduct, and I'm proud of that work. But what that work also taught me is that all the people who've done most of the running for office and most of the holding of offices all these years in the past decades have allowed our political culture to be contaminated. They have presided over the people's business being done in a way that dishonors our state. And we desperately need to shake up and transform a political system that works so very well for those at the top, a wealthy and well-connected and privileged few, and ignores the wishes of regular people. My life's work has been devoted to trying to break the grip of that big money influence and get regular people in the driver's seat of our government. That is what we need in a governor. We need a transformational governor who will be dedicated to the idea of getting regular people in the driver's seat of our government.
All right, so moving on to question number 2, and we'll begin with Matt on this one. What are the 3 most significant statewide issues you will concentrate on during your campaign, and why? 3 most significant issues.
Thank you very much. The most significant issue for me is wages and unions. One of the first things that I would do when I got in with a compliant legislature, and otherwise what I can do with executive orders and the veto power, is repeal right to work, repeal Act 10, put back in the prevailing wage, and raise the minimum wage. They have, the median wage adjusted for inflation right now is lower than it was under Jim Doyle 10 years ago. The orders from his donors are put a lid on wages. And they do have a dilemma. The Republicans have a dilemma. That is, they're basically wage killers who bust unions to kill wages, but their guiding principle is securities fraud. And so their dilemma is this: how do you bust unions, kill wages, and leave people with enough cash in their wallets to cheat them out of it? I mean, that literally is their dilemma. So I'm going to help with that dilemma by being the governor. The second thing is health care. He turned down $1 billion in Medicaid supplement, $1 billion to look like a conservative against Christie and Kasich, and 70,000 people got thrown off of health care. You know that if 70,000 people lose their health care, somebody died earlier than they had to die, and leave his family or her family earlier than they had to. That was immoral. I will get that billion back, and I will open up Badger Care to everybody. The third thing I will do is with education. He's destroying the University of Wisconsin. He's a vandal. He himself left university under humiliating circumstances, and he has a deep psychological urge to destroy accomplishment. And I will restore statutory tenure, put back in the full funding. In fact, the funding levels from long ago, so tuitions fully funded can come down. And I'll reaffirm the mission statement. And on K-12 education, I will fully fund K-12 for public education, not private. Those are my 3 priorities.
So I'm going to ask you to do something that candidates do at every one of these forums, and I've never seen anyone in the audience actually do. I'm going to direct you to Kelda's website, and nobody pulled their phone out, so nobody's actually going to look at the website. But oh, there you go. There's one. There are 4 topics on our website when it comes to issues that matter most to Kelda. They are driving the next generation of economic development in our state, moving away from Foxconn. Improving the health care delivery in our state, so taking the federal funds, expanding Badger Care, as she's done when she was in the Assembly when she co-authored a bill with Senator Feinhouse to do just that. Reinvesting in education and addressing gun reform in our state.
Kelvin and I just did an interview, and it's going to be on television tomorrow, so you can see a little bit more detail about us talking about healthcare. It's quite entertaining. I think of 3 priorities. we talked about healthcare. I want to talk a little bit about K-12 education. A lot of the suffering that's happening right now with our schools and the anxiety related to our schools has to do with lack of infrastructure and a lack of investment. I serve on the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding, and we've been all over the state hearing story after story after story about the mental health issues in schools, about the resources that are not available, about the mental health issues the teachers experience when students are going through strife. All of this comes back to resources. Guidance counselors have been cut. School psychologists have been cut. School counselors have been cut. The resources are not available, and it has to do with an investment that we need to make in K-12. I've written 4 alternatives to the governor's budget. Each time, I completely changed the funding formula so we recognize that it costs more to educate a child in poverty, or a child who doesn't speak English as their mother tongue, or a child who is disabled. We need to change the way we fund schools, and it can be done with the same dollars if we reform what's happened to the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation.
Yes.
And we stop all these cash payments, subsidies that are going out to companies who are simply not delivering. First, and then we need to fix the environment. So much of what's happened is because of the labor issues, because of a lack of respect. We need to hire back the scientists and put them to work helping us deal with climate change. We need to hire back the inspectors and inspect the CAFOs, inspect the sand mines. Again, go to the website, KathleenBynow.org.
First priority is to empower working people, to build a sturdy economy from the bottom up instead of trying to manufacture a sturdy economy from the top down. Stop showering tax breaks and state subsidies on a few at the top, and empower working people with living wages for every worker, with health care for all, with debt-free education. That's the first priority, is creating a sturdy economy from the bottom up. I call it geyser economics. Economic prosperity gushes up, it does not trickle down. Second priority is to take care of the land and the air and the water. We do that in 2 particular ways. One, we put the government on the side of the energy revolution. Our goal should be to make Wisconsin the first state in the nation fully powered by renewable energy. We also have to put the government on the side of small-scale sustainable agriculture instead of the massive-scale industrialization of agriculture. And priority 3 is ridding our state of the cronyism, corruption, and legal bribery that has taken a stranglehold on the state capitol and our state. We have to change that, and when we do that, we can accomplish the other 2 priorities.
Great, so we talked about jobs, talked about healthcare, talked about education a bit. You can find all of that on Andy Groning's website, andygroning.com. A lot of detailed plans there, much to my chagrin as communications director. He put a lot of information up there that he wrote by himself, by the way. He did not ask anybody out in DC to write a policy plan for him. He didn't ask anyone in Madison to write anything for him. He wrote them himself because these are his ideas. This is really how he feels about the state. While I probably only have a minute now to answer the question, I'll give you one idea here, as you can go to the website and find the others. One thing I like about Andy is his vision. He's someone who doesn't just think, you do this thing and I get to point B and then everything's fine. He thinks of how to connect those dots and see the larger picture. And so what Andy understands is that the state is facing a cliff right now when it comes to young people leaving the state. People aren't being attracted here, folks aren't being recruited here, there's no incentive for young individuals like myself and others to come to Wisconsin, to set down roots and to build a life here and to contribute to what we're doing here as a collective state. So one of the first ideas that Andy threw out back in, I want to say it was August, was to give businesses in the state of Wisconsin, and students for that matter, a retention tool and a recruitment tool. Let's tell graduates, don't pay, we're going to waive your state income tax, and we're going to make sure that you can put that to your student loans for the duration of your loan, as long as you work and live in Wisconsin, work full-time and live in Wisconsin for 6 months. What Andy gets is that people will not only come to Wisconsin, not only will businesses be able to recruit young people and top-tier talent to Wisconsin, but those folks are going to settle down. They're going to meet a lady, a guy, they're going to create a home, create a life, and invest in our state. I think that's part of that vision in a way, and again, that different way that Andy thinks, that is very advantageous, I think, to the state and to our future as well. So again, andygronick.com, that idea and many more are on there as well. You don't have to whip your phones out right now, but highly encourage you to after the event. Thank you.
All right, our final question before we do the closing comment round goes to Dan. You'll be starting. On August 15th, the day after you win the primary, a major job before all of us will be to unite the various Democratic factions to bring about a fall victory. What steps will you take to bring together the rural and urban electorate and progressive and traditional wings of the Democratic Party?
That's a pretty specific question that I don't actually know the answer to, so I'm going to pause on it. Kelda is fully committed to back whoever it is that wins the primary here. She believes it will be herself, and she's always worked for other candidates, so she'll do whatever it takes.
The first thing we need to beat Scott Walker is a message. We need to have a message that puts people first. When we think about what that means, it's immediately clear that people are not first right now. Yesterday I also got an email from a man from the Fox Valley. And he wrote and he said, I've been a Republican all of my life, but I feel like I'm on the out. And if you win that primary, I want you to come up here in Oshkosh and put a yard sign in my yard. Now, I want him to vote in the primary, so I'll be working on that part. But when you think about putting people first, it totally changes the dynamics. It changes the dynamics so that all of a sudden we're thinking about policies that make a difference in people's lives. We know that Trump won because Democrats and those who vote Democratic stayed home. It was a separate group of people that came out. Many of them registered for the first time and voted for Trump. Trump got the motivated people. He didn't get Hillary got the motivated people, but didn't get the people who weren't motivated. We need to motivate those people, and we motivate them by talking about things that matter in their lives. When I think about who that person is, we already have the votes we need in Madison and Milwaukee. We got as many seats as we can possibly get there. We need to elect Democrats in seats in the West, in the North, in the Fox Valley. I won in a district that Scott Walker won 3 times, in a district that Trump won. My county is 13,000, counting the cats and the dogs. 70% of the voters voted for Trump, and yet I consistently win. Because I talk about concepts, ideas, programs that make a difference in people's lives, like healthcare. Thank you.
We will not get a new governor by simply winning in places like Madison and Milwaukee. I come from a place, a small town of only 200 people, that had the distinction in the last election for governor of giving Scott Walker his biggest percentage margin of victory of any community in the state of Wisconsin. That's my hometown of Curtis. And that place was represented by Democrats in my youth. We have got to compete in every nook and cranny of this state. There are too many forgotten people living in forgotten places in Wisconsin. We have to go to those places. Our campaign has traveled more than 60,000 miles now, just since September 12th, when I announced my candidacy. You can't put on 60,000 miles making trips between Madison and Milwaukee. We have got to go everywhere in Wisconsin and compete everywhere and take our message everywhere. And that message does not have to change. It does not have to change one iota when you go to Minong as when you're in Milwaukee. We have to take a message all across the state, rural and urban. I have the advantage of having spent well over 2 decades of my life living way the hell out in the country. And I have also lived in the city. I've straddled those 2 worlds. It is essential that we straddle those 2 worlds if we are going to get a new governor in the state of Wisconsin.
All right, excuse me, I got something in my eye. Keep talking, so don't be distracted. Those ideas I told you about in the last answer that Andy put together himself, those ideas came from him traveling the state and speaking to people in towns big, medium, and big, medium, and small. That's how size works. And before he announced for governor, he ran across the state for 18 months, holding what he called kitchen table conversations, saying, I don't care what allegiance you are, which party you are, what part of the state you're from, come down, sit down, let's have a conversation about what's working in your life and what isn't working in your life. Those conversations spawn the ideas that are on our website right now at andygroening.com. And that's what we are doing in this campaign still. We just traveled to the Northeast and central Wisconsin last week, having these similar kinds of conversations, because we know that, yes, we have to play everywhere. And yes, we have to have a message that plays statewide, but we also have to listen to people. There are people all across the state that feels like Madison and that state house is not listening to them. So we can come into their backyards all day and say we have all the answers. It's not gonna be that effective, and Andy knows that. Andy understands that for 35 years, he dropped into crisis situations when the reason he was able to get results at these big businesses where everything's on the line. Your business is on the line, your livelihood is on the line, but he was able to get results because he never divided or attached himself to one divided side or the other. He said, let's come down, let's sit here, and let me listen to your concerns. Let me listen to what's working, what isn't working, so that I can figure out the details, so I can create a plan that works for everybody here, something innovative, something we haven't seen before, and that actually achieves the goals that you need. That's the kind of campaign we're running, because that's the kind of guy Andy is, and that's how we run, that's how he'll also govern when he's governor next year. Thank you.
Thank you. On the ship I was stationed on, we had sailors from Mississippi and Alabama, New York, California, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Wyoming, and we were shipmates. There was no urban-rural divide, there was no north-south divide, there was no racial divide, there was no class divide. We worked together, we stood watch together, we went on liberty together, and that's how I look at it. Everybody in this room is my shipmate, and so is everybody in the Democratic Party and everybody in the state. 100 years ago, Fighting Bob La Follette was not seen as a Dane County Democrat. Fighting Bob La Follette had unnegotiable integrity. And as I go around the state, what we need restored in our government is unnegotiable integrity, and we don't have it now. And I've been up in Spooner and Osceola, I've been up in, and I have relatives in Random Lake, Monroe, Wisconsin Rapids, Hayward, all over the state. These are relatives as well. But when I go around the state, the message is one of restoring integrity to our government. That's what people want. And they don't look on me as a Milwaukee guy or any other guy, although I do meet with my fellow veterans around the state and have gotten good support. But ultimately, the issue to me is this. 100 years ago, Fighting Bob La Follette cleaned up the corruption in the 19th century. Right now, we need a Fighting Bob La Follette for the 21st century to clean up this corruption, and that new Fighting Bob La Follette, I want to be named Matt Flynn. Thank you.
That finishes our questions. As I mentioned, we had 3, and now we'll start closing rounds. And Kathleen, you have first. Go ahead.
Thank you. In 2016, my state rep lost. His name was Chris Dano. He was one of the last rural Democrats in the state assembly. After that happened, I went on a personal journey to try and understand what happened in my backyard in western Wisconsin. I sat in the courthouse and physically counted new voter registration applications. I counted 1,664, which was 12% of the total vote and 24% of the vote in Whitehall, the county seat. I've heard a lot of pundits talk about western Wisconsin and what happened to Wisconsin in 2016. And they think that a whole bunch of people voted for Obama in 2012 and voted for Trump in 2016, and I knew that was wrong. What I discovered is that different sets of voters went to the polls in 2012 and 2016. This has huge implications for us winning in 2018, because we don't need to talk Trump light. We don't need to talk angry white man. What we need to talk is about putting people first. It's about policies and messages that make a difference in people's lives. When we come to win on election day, we win because we motivated people to come out and vote for something that changes their life, that they can truly believe in. When we put people first, that's a message that's repeatable, it's believable. It's something that everybody can relate to. When I think about how we win, we need a campaign that's grassroots, that's bottom up. We need a candidate that's enthusiastic and exciting. We need a strategy that works all across the state to talk to people about what wins in their neighborhood. That's the kind of campaign I'm running. And I humbly ask for your vote and ask you to join us. Thank you.
I said a moment ago that we won't get a new governor by winning simply in places like Madison and Milwaukee. I was in Park Falls not too long ago. They heard that I was from Curtis, and you should have seen people. They said, he's from north of Highway 29. And that matters to people. We can't ignore places like that. But I'll tell you, there are two other things that will not beat Scott Walker. We will not beat Scott Walker with money. He will have vastly more than anyone. We're going to have to do this with people power. We're going to have to do this with grassroots organization. This is going to have to be people talking neighbor to neighbor all across the state, because he will have vastly more money than any of us. And there's one other thing that will not beat Scott Walker. We will not get a new governor by simply telling voters over and over again what's wrong with Scott Walker. We have got to be for something. And we have got to offer a vision of what this state has the potential to become and how to reach that potential. It has to be an inspiring vision. It has to be, it can't be timid. This is no time for timid. This is no time for same old, same old. We have got to break the mold. When we make the people in those forgotten places a better offer than they have been made in a very long time, we're going to win in 2018.
So I'm going to pull out an Andyism for you. This is one of the things that he does a lot of times around the state, but I think it's an important exercise. Because a lot of times we have these forums and there's 5 or 6 people on stage. You hear a lot of ideas, but what you got to do when you go in your home or in your car on your drive home, before you start the car actually, for this particular exercise, close your eyes and think about who you think can go toe-to-toe with Scott Walker. It's October. It's the 2 weekends before Election Day. Who's going to go toe-to-toe with Scott Walker? Is it someone who looks and sounds like everyone else that has lost to Scott Walker 3 times before? Or do you think you need something new? Do you think you need somebody who's going to bring some fresh leadership, to some pragmatic ideas, some common sense ideas to that stage, and call out Scott Walker for what he is? That is a professional fundraiser. That's a failed governor. And give a vision for this state that is optimistic, that is born from the ideas of everyone here in this room and rooms just like it across Wisconsin. That's who Andy is. Andy's not the same old book that you have read before. Andy is a new chapter, a new verse, and it's a good song. And I'm prepared to sing it as his comms director, and I think the rest of the state will be prepared to do so as well when they think about who can beat Scott Walker in the fall. That's Andy. That's someone who's not a politician. That's someone who's coming from the outside, who understands what needs to be fixed in this state and in our politics, and has a very, very successful track record of doing that in the private sector, and will replicate that in this sector of politics and in the State House next year. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very good to be here. And in my summation, I just want to talk about 3 issues that I think reflect tremendous financial mismanagement of this state that must be corrected. One of them is the Foxconn contract. Now, this is a contract where Scott Walker, in my view, so that he can say he created some jobs and go on television, just unwisely gave actually $4.5 billion to a company from Taiwan that does much of its work in mainland China. $4.5 billion, $300 million a year for 15 years. They are under investigation in mainland China right now for securities fraud in an IPO, for labor fraud, and for pollution. Now, Communist China, an authoritarian government, has crooked laws themselves. If they think that Foxconn is bad by their standards, what are we doing letting them in Wisconsin? And what are we really doing giving them $4.5 billion? Please, okay? Then they said, well, exempt us from your wetlands. Yes, sir. Exempt us from the environmental impact statement. Yes, sir. Let us take a little over 2 billion gallons a year out of Lake Michigan and restore 65% of it in semi-polluted form. Yes, sir. And give us the eminent domain power to throw people out of their homes. Yes, sir. And exempt us from the Court of Appeals jurisdiction. And he's not a lawyer, and he said, yes, sir. Why did they do that? The only entity in the history of the state that is not subject to the jurisdiction of our Court of Appeals. They get sued in Racine, it goes to the 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court who rubber stamp whatever they say. Number one. Number two, he got rid of $800 million in train money, and three, $1 billion, as I've said before, in healthcare. That's a swing of $6.3 billion. We can't afford that. That would recirculate in the state many times. We need an aggressive and tough governor. We need a smart governor who knows how to financially manage the state. Thank you very much.
I realize as I'm sitting here, I badly misunderstood the previous question, which is, I think, an artifact of yet another reason of why I'm not running for governor. I thought the question was, are we going to unite around the candidate? But the question was, how do you unite Wisconsin? How do you get urban areas and rural areas, and how do you speak to everyone? And the reason I misinterpreted it so badly, I'm sitting here reflecting on it, is because it's just not a topic of conversation in our house. We don't think about people who live in Wisconsin as being urban or being rural. We just think of them as people. And Kelda's out hustling. She's wearing out our car right now at 3 events tonight, and that's why she asked me to be here today. So what we do talk about around the kitchen table is how do we make this race a race of national interest? Because it is a race of national interest. In fact, it's a race of global interest when you think about how Wisconsin will maybe determine how things go in 2020. So her strategy for this race is connect with people, be authentic, and be herself in a way that speaks to a national audience, and bring in that attention and help and get that support from all around the country, because it is that globally important type of race. So many of you have seen her first video. People talk about it as the first time a candidate breastfed in a campaign video, which is great. She did do that. But really, we think about it as first time someone was truly authentic and was just herself, unapologetically. She sat there and she talked about legislation that she had written and passed, and she did so in a way that I think makes people feel understood and heard, and I think that's going to be the key for Kelda as she goes forward and does make this race one of national significance. Thanks.
All right, you've heard these 5 campaigns and their either candidates or their spokesmen say what had to be said. What I heard is that any one of them is better than Scott Walker. So with that said, let's thank, we've already done a lot of applause here, but let's just thank these gentlemen and ladies who are here, and they're not here in the case of Dan, for having the courage to stand up and run and do something that we all wish we could do, but we just aren't quite there yet. So let's give one more hand. And the final word today belongs to Nate Tim. Nate?
Thanks, Roger. And remember, folks, whoever wins the primary, we got to stand up and fight for that person, because that's what it's about, taking back the government. And I want to thank Roger Springman here for doing a nice job managing this part of the program. I want to thank all of you for being here today and participating. There's still probably a few tickets over at the Feed Mill Restaurant if some of you want to get in on the dinner this evening. And I hope you will all stay tuned to being active in that period that I mentioned before this morning. We've only got 6 weeks. We've got only 2.5 months between the 14th of August and the 6th of November. So we all have got to be ready to go. You got to figure out how you're going to get your yard sign for whoever shows up as the winner on the 14th. So let's get our act together. Let's not splinter. Let's not be, well, let's wait and see what will happen. Let's be ready to act. Thank you so much.